During a family dinner, my husband's parents suddenly announced, "We took out a loan in your name. Family helps family." My husband nodded and said, "You'll pay it off, right?" I smiled, pulled out my phone, and said, "Good thing I just called the bank to report fraud." Their faces went pale as their plan crumbled instantly. It was a typical sweltering summer evening in Austin, Texas. The sun had dipped below the horizon, but the heat lingered, wrapping the city in a heavy blanket. Our modest suburban home sat quiet, the hum of the air conditioner the only sound as I set the dining table for a family dinner. The table was adorned with our everyday plates and silverware, nothing fancy, just the usual setup for a casual meal. In the kitchen, my husband, Mark, was engaged in light conversation with his parents, Robert and Susan. Their voices drifted into the dining room, a mix of laughter and indistinct chatter. Our two children, Lily and Jake, were in the living room, their giggles punctuating the air as they played with their toys. The scent of roasted chicken and mashed potatoes wafted through the house, a comforting aroma that usually signaled a pleasant evening ahead. As we all gathered around the table, the atmosphere was warm and familiar. Robert, a man in his late 60s with graying hair and a slightly stooped posture, cleared his throat, drawing our attention. He exchanged a brief glance with Susan, who sat beside him, her hands clasped tightly together on her lap. There was a noticeable tension in their demeanor, a stark contrast to the lightheartedness from moments before. "We've been meaning to talk to you both about something important," Robert began, his voice steady but carrying an undertone of unease. He avoided direct eye contact, focusing instead on the napkin he was nervously folding and unfolding in his hands. Susan nodded in agreement, her expression a mix of apprehension and hope. "Yes, it's about a financial matter," she added, her tone attempting to be reassuring but failing to mask the anxiety beneath. Mark and I exchanged puzzled looks. Financial discussions weren't uncommon in our family, but the gravity in their demeanor suggested something more serious. Mark, a man in his early 40s with a strong build and an air of quiet confidence, leaned forward slightly, his brow furrowing. "What is it?" Mark asked, his voice calm but edged with curiosity and concern. Robert took a deep breath, as if bracing himself for the impact of his next words. "We took out a loan in your name," he admitted, his eyes flickering up to gauge our reactions before quickly looking away. "Family helps family, right?" The room fell into a stunned silence. The only sounds were the distant chirping of cicadas outside and the soft clinking of Lily and Jake's toys in the next room. The air grew heavy, the weight of Robert's confession settling over us like a thick fog. Mark's face paled, his jaw tightening as he processed his father's words. "You did what?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, yet each word was sharp and clear. Susan hurriedly interjected, her tone pleading and eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We were in a tight spot financially. The bank wouldn't approve us for a loan, but they suggested that if we had a co-signer with good credit, it could work. So, we thought of you too." Her words tumbled out in a rush, as if saying them quickly would lessen their impact. I felt a cold wave of disbelief wash over me. "But we never agreed to co-sign anything," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and confusion. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped the edge of the table, seeking some form of stability in the whirlwind of emotions. Robert shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze fixed on the tablecloth. We didn't exactly ask." "We used your information to secure the loan," he confessed, his voice barely audible. The admission hung in the air, a heavy burden that couldn't be ignored. Mark's hands clenched into fists on the table, knuckles turning white. "That's identity theft," he said, his voice rising with a mix of disbelief and fury. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" His eyes burned with intensity, locking onto his father's guilty face. Susan reached out, attempting to place a hand on Mark's arm, but he pulled away, the distance between them growing more than just physical. "We had every intention of paying it off," she insisted, desperation coloring her voice. "We just needed some time. We thought we could manage the payments." Her eyes searched Mark's face for any sign of understanding or forgiveness. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart and organize my thoughts. "How much is the loan for?" I asked, dreading the answer but knowing we needed all the facts. My voice was steadier now, the initial shock giving way to a need for clarity. Robert hesitated, his throat working as he swallowed hard. $30,000, he finally replied, his voice barely above a whisper. The figure landed like a punch to the gut, leaving me momentarily breathless. My mind raced, calculating the potential damage. This wasn't a small sum. The implications for our credit, our financial stability, were enormous. Late payments, default notices, a tarnished credit score, all because of a decision made without our knowledge or consent. Mark ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply, a sign of his mounting frustration. "And you've been making the payments?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. His eyes bore into his parents, demanding honesty. Robert shifted in his chair, shoulders slumping. "We made the first payment," he said quietly. "But then things got worse. We missed the last four. For missed payments." The blood drained from my face. I stared at them like I didn't even know who they were. Susan bit her lip, twisting her napkin with shaky hands. "We were going to catch up," she added quickly, voice cracking. "We didn't mean for it to go this far." Mark stood so fast his chair screeched back. His voice cracked like thunder. "You missed 4 payments on a $30,000 loan, in our name?" He looked like he was ready to punch a hole in the wall. "We have a mortgage. Kids. A future to protect." Susan reached for him, desperate. "We're sorry. We just thought..." "No," he snapped, pulling away. "You didn't think. You stole from us." The silence that followed was suffocating. I looked at Robert. "How did you even get our info?" He didn't answer. That's when it hit me. "You used that time we refinanced," I whispered. "You took the old papers we left at your house, didn't you?" Susan looked like she might cry. "We were going to shred them. But when we got desperate. We saw the social security numbers. We didn't plan it. I stood up. You know what else just happens? Jail time." Mark stepped in front of me, his voice lower now, but more dangerous. "You lied, you committed fraud, and now our credit is wrecked." Then, something twisted inside me. Not just anger, but something colder. I walked over to the counter, grabbed my phone, and unlocked it. "Good thing," I said calmly, "I just called the bank." Robert and Susan's heads snapped up. "What?" I looked straight at them. "I told them I saw a loan on our credit report that we never authorized. They froze it, and they're investigating it as fraud." Susan turned white. You reported us?" "You left us no choice," I said. "I'm not risking our future because you decided to play financial roulette with our lives." Robert looked like he was going to say something, but Mark cut him off. "How could you do this to your own son?" Then Susan snapped. Her whole face changed. She dropped the soft-spoken act. "Oh, come on, Mark," she barked. "It's not like you guys are poor. You drive a new car, live in a nice house, you take vacations. And we raised you. You owe us something." Mark stared at her like he was seeing a stranger. "You think that gives you the right to ruin us? You wouldn't even have what you do if it weren't for us," she screamed. "Family helps family." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I turned to Mark, my voice flat. This wasn't desperation. This was entitlement. Robert stood up. "We didn't ask for much. 30,000 is nothing to people like you. People like us? We both worked full-time. We budgeted, saved, sacrificed. We didn't have rich people money. We had responsible money." Mark's voice dropped low. "Get out of our house." "What?" Susan gasped. "You heard me. Get out. But the kids, don't use them," I cut in. "Don't you dare use them." They didn't move. Mark opened the front door. "Out! Now!" Susan muttered something about "this is how you treat family," and Robert said, "You'll regret this," but they left. The door shut behind them. The kids peeked in from the living room, confused. I smiled, trying to keep my voice light. Grandma and Grandpa had to go home early. We got the kids to bed. Then Mark sat on the couch and buried his face in his hands. I sat beside him, my own hands still shaking. "This could ruin us," he said. "We could lose everything." I looked at him. Not if we fight back. The next day, I met with a fraud investigator at the bank. She was calm, professional, took down everything. Then she leaned in and said, "You're not the first person to report something like this. Family fraud cases are up." I swallowed. So what happens now? We'll dig in. But you may want to pull your full credit reports, freeze them, and file a police report. A police report. I didn't want to believe it would come to that. But when we checked our credit reports that night, I found something that made my stomach turn. There were 2 loans. Not one. The second one was smaller, about $9,000, but it was in my name only. A different lender. A credit union we'd never used. I stared at the screen in disbelief. They did it again. Mark looked over my shoulder. No, they planned this. The first loan was just the beginning. The fraud wasn't a mistake. It wasn't desperation. It was calculated. And now it was war. We didn't sleep that night. We sat up with laptops open, cross-checking everything we could find. Credit reports, banking apps, old emails, anything. I was scared to blink, worried I'd miss something else they snuck past us. The second loan hit harder than the first. Not because of the amount, but because of what it meant. They were methodical. This wasn't a one-time slip. They'd planned to drain us slow, like a leech. The first loan was the big ask. The second? That was the one they thought we'd never notice. The next morning, I filed a police report. That part was brutal. Sitting in front of a detective and explaining, yes, my in-laws stole our identities and took out loans in our names. Watching his face go from neutral to stunned. I felt like I was betraying some unspoken rule of family, but what else could we do? Mark was quiet on the ride home. He wasn't usually the type to hold grudges. But this had broken something in him. That evening, we got a call from the fraud investigator at the bank. "I found something," she said, her voice flat but tight. "The co-applicant for both loans listed their income as working for your company, Mrs. Barnes." My stomach dropped. "Excuse me? Your company. Your business name, your EIN, your job title. All of it." They hadn't just stolen our identities. They had forged documents to make it look like Susan worked for me. Which meant if the bank came back at us hard, I could be investigated for faking a loan application, even though I had nothing to do with it. Mark sat on the couch, stunned, as I repeated what she told me. She made fake pay stubs. Under my business name. "They're framing you," he said quietly. "They were going to let you take the fall." I was shaking now. This wasn't just fraud. This was criminal identity framing. And if the bank didn't believe us, I could lose everything: my license, my clients, my business. I looked at him. What if they've done this before? That idea opened a whole new door of horror. So I started digging. Not just into us, but into them. Old court records, bankruptcy filings, credit records, anything I could get my hands on. And what I found? Susan had a judgment against her from 2015. Small claims court. Another family member had sued her cousin, apparently, for unauthorized use of a credit account. Sound familiar? Mark stared at the screen with me. How the hell did I never know about this? She probably lied. Said it was a misunderstanding. You didn't question it. Then we found something else. A tax lien against Robert from 2017. A big one. From the IRS. We sat there connecting dots. Piece by piece. These people weren't just desperate. They were experienced. This was a pattern. A system. They used family like a piggy bank quietly, under the radar, until they bled them dry and moved on to the next. I called the cousin listed in the small claims case. Took a chance. Told her who I was. She sighed before I even finished. "You're Mark's wife." "Yeah." She paused. Then said, "You just found out what they do, didn't you?" That hit like a freight train. She told me the same story. Loan opened in her name. Promises to pay. Then threats when she tried to close it. Then silence. She sued, won, but never got a dime back. "They always act like victims," she said. Then they flip. Blame you. Make it about family loyalty. Then ghost you. "I'm sorry." I thanked her and hung up, my hands trembling. They weren't just thieves. They were predators. using love and blood ties as cover. When I told Mark, he didn't speak for a full minute. Then he said they were never going to stop. Ever. We knew what we had to do next. We hired a lawyer. Not just for the fraud. For a restraining order. We had no idea how far they'd go. But then, just when I thought we had control of the situation, we got a knock at the door. It was a man in a gray uniform. A process server. He handed me an envelope. Robert and Susan Barnes, he said, are suing you for defamation and emotional distress. I just stood there, frozen. Excuse me? They're claiming you damaged their reputation by making false accusations about fraud. The irony hit so hard I laughed. They'd stolen from us. Forged documents. Framed me for fake employment. And now they were suing us. For defamation. Mark came to the door and I handed him the letter. He read it. His face was stone. Then he looked up at me and said, "This isn't a fight anymore. It's a war. We were being sued. By the people who committed actual fraud against us." Mark paced the kitchen for a full hour while I sat at the table with the envelope in front of me. My stomach felt hollow. There it was in black and white. Accusations, fake stories, twisting every piece of truth into something ugly. According to them, we were the manipulators. We were the liars. We handed everything to our lawyer. He read it all, took one long breath, then said, "This is pure intimidation. They're hoping you'll back off and drop the fraud claims." But we didn't. We doubled down. And then? We got lucky. 2 weeks later, the fraud investigator called again. She'd found more. Susan had created a fake email account using my name. She used it to communicate with the loan officer. Pretending to be me, giving permission, answering questions, and even sending in digital copies of our IDs that were clearly tampered with. The bank had screenshots. Full email threads. IP addresses. Timestamps. The bank's fraud department pressed charges. The police showed up at Robert and Susan's home early one morning. They were both arrested. Mark and I sat on the porch that afternoon, quiet. I should have felt relief. But mostly, I felt cold. Like a part of me had been carved out. A few weeks later, the court case began. We pressed forward with both criminal and civil charges. The defamation case they filed against us? It got thrown out almost instantly. The evidence of their lies was stacked so high the judge barely glanced at it before dismissing. Then came the moment we weren't expecting. Our lawyer called us before the next hearing. "There's a new development," he said. "Good or bad?" I asked. "That depends," he replied. Robert and Susan aren't the only ones under investigation now. I felt my blood go cold. What do you mean? Apparently, Susan listed your business as her employer not just on the loan, but also on her last 2 years of tax returns. I nearly dropped the phone. She had filed income using my business, claiming I paid her a full-time salary, which meant she had either A. been collecting benefits under false pretenses, or B. committed tax fraud. And since it was under my business ID, the IRS flagged it. I was now under review too. It didn't matter that I didn't know. It didn't matter that I'd never paid her. I was tied to it. I had to sit in an IRS office, sweating through every paper and receipt, proving I had no connection to what she'd done. They believed me. Eventually. But I had to pay for my mistake too. Because I'd been too trusting. Too casual with documents. Too quick to leave private files at other people's houses. I gave her access, even if not knowingly. That part stung the most. I made it easy for her. The trial dragged on. Mark testified. I did too. The cousin who had sued Susan in 2015 showed up. So did another distant relative who'd been burned years earlier, but had stayed silent out of shame. Robert looked broken. Susan? She cried the whole time. Not because she was sorry, but because her plan had finally blown up. The jury came back after just one day. Guilty. On all counts. They were both sentenced. Not just fines, real jail time. The judge was furious. Called it one of the most cold and calculated family betrayals he'd seen in years. When the bailiff led them away in cuffs, Susan tried to lock eyes with me. But I didn't flinch. I didn't feel bad. Not anymore. But the story doesn't end there. A few months after sentencing, we got a letter from Robert. Handwritten. Rambling. Mostly excuses. Then, near the end, one line stuck out. We raised Mark. We thought we'd earned the right to lean on him. I didn't realize how far we'd fallen until it was too late. Mark read it. Then he tossed it into the trash. We sold the house the next year. Moved across the country. Somewhere quieter. Somewhere no one knew us. We rebuilt. Our credit. Our peace. Ourselves. But we never forgot. Not what they did. Not what we learned. Not what we allowed to happen. I keep a copy of that forged loan application in a folder in my office. Not because I want to remember the pain, but because I never want to forget the price of silence, the danger of it's just family. Sometimes, the people closest to you are the ones holding the knife. And sometimes, you have to be the one to twist it back.